Yeah, just press record. Yes. So I am pursuing an MSPH through the ESC department, and I'll be your co-host slash moderator for today. Just before we go into further introductions, prior to Ryan's introduction, we'll just go over a few rules. So everyone entered was muted upon entry, but you are able to just communicate with me just by doing the little hand raise emojis, and I'll just call on you and you'll unmute and you can ask your questions. And if you're not too comfortable with asking the questions out loud, you can always go to the Pathable chat tab and put your questions there. And I will be keeping an eye out throughout the entire sessions and ask them for you. So yeah, that's my spiel for now. And Ryan, you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks very much. So it's really a pleasure to be here to see all the faces virtually. So again, yeah, Ryan Schweitzer, and maybe I give a quick background. So on my professional trajectory, because I like to say I have a tortuous, not a torturous. So tortuous meaning that I've done a lot of different work in a lot of different sectors. So I started out working in the private sector maybe 22 years ago in engineering, in field engineering. And I have 3 engineering degrees, so I have a lot of engineering background. And I think that really has equipped me and prepared me for the ability to recognize the areas that I need to improve. And so one of my recommendations to young people when they're coming up is to recognize what you're good at and recognize what your deficiencies are, and to pursue continuing education. And so what I've been able to do is pursue different certificates and take classes along the way that were outside of the core engineering curricula. And that I think has really equipped me to be able to participate in different conversations. And so, yeah, so from that work in the private sector, then I did some work with local NGOs working in kind of international water quality projects, mainly in Latin America. I went back to grad school and went to the Master's International program in engineering, and ended up doing that as part of a Peace Corps service in the Dominican Republic, and then went into academia and pursued a PhD. And along the way, I was able to take some time, and I worked in Latin America, in the Dominican Republic, for the National Water Ministry, and then also for local government. So that was an interesting kind of juxtaposition. And then after that, was in academia doing some teaching and research, and then went back into the private sector. I was a bit frustrated with academia, but I really do appreciate the skills that it has equipped me with in terms of research and kind of critical thinking and questioning. And then I spent time in the private sector working for a very small company that was really doing kind of WASH consultancies. And that was kind of a mixed bag of things: impact evaluations, assessments, a lot of work around assessing sustainability. And then after that, I worked for the UN, for the Refugee Agency, for about 4.5 years. And then most recently with the Centers for Disease Control, as I mentioned earlier. And so I think, again, my background is in engineering. I've been able to take a lot of classes in public health, and also around sociology, anthropology. And I really think that exposure allows me to engage in conversations with subject matter experts in those areas, and to talk and think intelligently and ask the right questions. And I think I always encourage young people to recognize, again, that, you know, we're always better with diversity. So having diversity of thought, diversity of background is really beneficial. And so always recognize what you bring to the table, and your unique perspective is a huge contribution. So even if you're the youngest person in the room, don't let that phase you, because your experience is unique and you can bring something to the conversation. So maybe I'll leave it at that, and really look forward to hearing about you and answering any questions that you have.
Emily just said that she's also that they are also a former Peace Corps volunteer. So you have a fellow person in here. So anyone have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or put any questions in the Pathable chat tab. Oh, Emily rose her hands. Go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
She's maybe still muted. It looks like it. Can you control it?
Yes, I can. Let me go ahead and Emily. slight technical issue, but it's Try unmuting yourself. If it works now, no, okay. This is, okay. I apologize for this. This is,
Oh, that worked, thanks.
okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, I was excited to also find a former Peace Corps volunteer. My question is, I guess, how hard is it did you find it switch back and forth between academia and the nonprofit sector? Because after I ended up being a 5-year Peace Corps volunteer and then worked in nonprofit and then decided I wanted to like learn more and did my master's and doing my PhD. And I like academia. I kind of want to see how far I can make it here, but there's certain things I really miss about nonprofit work and I get really frustrated at academia. But I'm also scared if I leave, like, then I can't get back in it. I don't know if that question makes sense, but yeah, I don't know, the sort of switching back and forth, which I could see myself doing just based on what I've been doing in the past.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Emily. And that was one I was grappling with when I made the decision to go from finishing up a PhD, which is quite a commitment, to then going right away to a small private sector company. And the concern from some of my mentors was like, well, is this the right move? Are you gonna be able to come back to academia if you want to? And so I think the question is, at the end of the day, if it is like, for example, the typical tenure track position at a research institution, so an R1 institution, is that you go from a PhD to do postdoc, and then you're applying for those positions immediately. I think somebody told me at a conference linked to that they kind of frown upon anything beyond 3 years after your PhD, if it's not in a postdoc position, to try and come back to those positions. But I have friends that have done that. So I think it's kind of up to you in terms of what does it mean to go back to academia. And there are a lot of people that come back to academia and later in their career as a professor of practice. And that's something that I'm still interested in doing. And in my role here at CDC, I'm hopeful I am becoming more engaged in operational research aspects. And so I think and those positions are a bit more bespoke and there's fewer of them, but there's also fewer people that probably tick the box in terms of having the bona fide academic credentials and having the field experience. So if that makes sense.
So this is a quick turnaround time. So we have 4 minutes left. Anyone else? So go ahead and ask. I think Ademola, you are able to unmute.
There we go. Okay, I was able to unmute there. Hi, I'm Miranda Mello. I'm a current grad student at University of Colorado Boulder in global environmental engineering. And I was just curious, I guess, to hear a little bit more about your day-to-day and when you do get deployed, how long that lasts.
Yes, my day-to-day is meetings and emails, but no, it's a lot of working on specific. Currently with COVID, there's a lot of travel restrictions. So a lot of our global projects, we've kind of taken a more funding approach. And so we're providing kind of remote TA and project management to those specific partner agencies, which is kind of the large, so UNICEF and larger WASH actors for the COVID funds. And then deployments within my branch typically range minimum of 2 weeks and maximum of a few months, but it all depends. And some people can be deployed for longer, but that's typical because they're mainly based here in Atlanta in the US.
Thank you. So next, I believe, is Samantha. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thank you. So I also saw, Ryan, that you worked with IRC in the past. I'm on the tail end of an internship with them. So yeah, I think incredible organization. I know you've spoken a bit about working in all these different types of organizations. As a grad student who is still, figuring out where I want to go after graduation. I'd love if you could speak more to your experience in these different types of organizations, from, UNHCR to these more bespoke, smaller organizations. And also if you could speak to some of the skills and characteristics that you like to see from people who, you're potentially looking to join your team, or, to take on a role within the CDC.
That's a really broad question, but it's a good one, Samantha. So I think, yeah, I mean, having this range of working for very small organizations to huge bureaucracies, I think at the end of the day, like, you have to find the right fit for you. And I think I enjoyed working for a small team that obviously provides a lot of flexibility. I could pursue projects that I really was interested in. A team that was, kind of the go-to for that, the quantitative aspect. So I was kind of the data analyst in the team. Obviously, with the big bureaucracy, there's a lot of advantages. There's a lot more opportunities. There's a lot of different projects you can, potentially engage in, and you can jump from role to role. However, you're a kind of a small cog in a big machine for all the advantages and disadvantages. The one good thing is that I'm surrounded by professionals, a lot of whom are the top expert in their area. So it's great because you can learn through those interactions. So I think at the end of the day, it's kind of finding what's right for you. And I think in terms of characteristics, again, I think getting back to this, reaching out to people, I think the proactiveness is really important, because I think a lot of people don't recognize how that's viewed as an employer, that it shows that you care about your work, you're passionate, you're going to go the extra mile, you're going to work the extra hour, and you bring that. And maybe I hand over to Brian Reed, who probably should be the person that's presenting his career directory.
Yeah, no, you and I have both got a lot of experience, and I know from experience, what sort of questions do you get asked to interview? Because that's what that's what the employers are after. So thinking of all your experience that you've had, what were the difficult questions you've had at interviews?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sometimes I asked a question that was about how do you convince somebody that's quite obstinate in their opinion about something on a technical matter, right? Basically, and it was I don't want to get into the specifics here because it was quite a big setup to that question, but I kind of struggled with that. And I think the reason is I didn't, I think my health communications and that kind of skill set in that area is not as strong as it should be. I come at it from an engineering perspective, so I went back to the logic, explained the logic. But I think what we see now with COVID vaccination and with climate change, you can't always rely on logic and the communication of logic. And the best example I have of that is I took a cab here in Atlanta on the way to CDC to get my COVID test. And I asked somehow the cab driver, we got on the question of vaccinations, and he was an anti-vaxxer. And I basically had about, the cab ride to try and convince him, and I didn't. And so I think that could be the best question ever, to set somebody up to say, how do you convince that person? And so anyways, I don't know. That was an example for me anyways.
So thank you so much for all the questions and the answers. So we are about the 12 minutes time for our first session. So feel free to move on to the next rooms as well, and stick around if you want to, but you should go ahead and move into the other room to meet the other presenters. And
just before people leave, I put my email in there. So I'm happy to if you have questions or follow up, or if you want to share your CV, get some feedback or something like that, please feel free to send a message. Thank you. Thanks, Brian, for the question. I am going to give it one more minute for more people to shuffle in, and we'll start the second 12 minutes. So Lynn, is there everybody gets to go to every person? Okay. Okay, good. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So if you were not here for the past 12 minutes, my name is Lunit Silme, and I'm a graduate student at UNC. I'm pursuing a Master's of Science in Public Health in the Environmental Science and Engineering department. And
and I will let Ryan introduce himself in a few seconds, but just a few rules. So everyone who enters the room is muted upon entry, but whenever you need to ask questions, you can just raise your hand and I will unmute you. Or if you don't feel comfortable asking questions out loud, you can always go to the Pathable chat tab and ask your questions. So Ryan, you have the floor again.
Okay, so I'll try to make my intro shorter because last time we didn't have enough everybody's questions. So yeah, so my background is in engineering and in terms of education. So I have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in civil and environmental engineering. And I've spent since graduating, I've spent time working in the private sector, also in the public sector, so working for a local municipality, also working for a national water ministry. I've worked as a volunteer in the Peace Corps. I've also worked for a small NGO and also with the UN, with the Refugee Agency, and now most recently with the CDC, so the federal government. I think that probably looking back in my career, because I've been both in kind of headquarters positions and also in the field, I think it's really important that you spend time in the field and really in the trenches, so to speak, because I think that really allows you to empathize with some of the challenges and the fact that oftentimes it's not an engineering issue. It's really about the interface between the infrastructure and the people and really the system that supports the services that are being provided by the infrastructure. And oftentimes engineers are a bit disconnected from that. So I think that's really critical. So yeah, so maybe I'll just leave it there and go out to you all with your comments or questions.
I am going to look at the chat here on Zoom. So there's no hand raised yet, so I'll check Pathable.
I can certainly keep blabbing if there's no. So looks like Allison has a question.
Yes, let
Thanks,
me go
Allison.
ahead and unmute Allison as soon as this works. Okay, Zoom is. I'm sorry, guys. Allison, go ahead and try to unmute now to see if it will work.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand feature while on Zoom. I was wondering if your position is public health engineer, or if that's just like how you would qualify yourself. Like, is your position at the CDC public health engineer?
Yeah, so that's that's kind of a self-designated title because my current title is something that doesn't really make sense. But that's kind of what I feel I am in terms of my role that I've been doing basically my entire career is really engineering, but really it's really about public health at the end of the day. It's about preventing the spread of disease. And so my current role, for example, I was recently just deployed to the US to an Air Force base, and it was really looking at the infrastructure and trying to mitigate some of the fecal oral transmission that we were seeing in terms of the clinicians and the syndromal surveillance that we saw. So yeah, so it's working with public health practitioners on a daily basis, but coming at it from an engineering perspective.
So I don't think I see any. Oh, there we go. Erin, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Hi, Ryan. Nice to meet you. My main question is, so I come from, well, obviously very early in my career, but I just graduated with an engineering degree, and now I'm starting my PhD in environmental science and engineering at UNC, and it's been great. My main question surrounds kind of how you balance that engineering with public health side. So it's been a very strange transition for me to kind of navigate this whole pathway.
Good. It's a good question. And so, I mean, again, I think what engineering academic background and even in terms of as a practitioner, as an engineer, it really sets you up for the critical thinking and the kind of the logical step by step approach that engineers take in problem deconstruction and I think the kind of the continual solutions oriented thinking is really beneficial. And I realize other disciplines teach that as well, but I think engineering comes at it from a quite unique perspective across all engineering disciplines. And I realize that they're varied in terms of the thematically and so on. But I think what I think is really beneficial about working as an engineer in a public health setting is that oftentimes there are people that don't have that kind of the hard science background. I mean, there are definitely, but many times there are, for example, kind of public health analysts or people that are more on the communication side. And so I think it's coming with a unique skill set. And I think recognizing that at the end of the day, your skill set is important, and that it's as a team, interdisciplinary team, that at the end of the day that solutions and problems get solved. So I think don't feel that you don't have a place at the table and that you don't have a voice, because you do, because it's an important perspective. But also I've seen many engineers that say things like simplify things and say just do it, and they don't recognize at the end of the day oftentimes. And there's a lot of social elements that we need to consider, and things around behavior change that need to be really thought through by the subject matter experts, which aren't engineers in that case.
Thank you so much. So we have a question from, if I mispronounce it, please feel free. Oh, I think they may have dropped out of the call. Oh, no, they're not. So you are able to unmute yourself.
Hi. Thank you, Ryan, for your good points. So I have a question. If you go back, would you change your education? Because I have a bachelor's and 2 masters in civil engineering, but I want to change my path. So I was wondering, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think I would go back, and probably I was a few credits away from getting an MPH, and I decided instead to get a certificate. And I think that there are instances at the end of the day, I mean, you're much more than a degree, right? And your experiences and everything. So I think that don't go back if it's just to get that piece of paper. However, I think that there are instances where in certain circumstances, it is almost like a key to the door, or a ticket to the show, or something like that, where I had a colleague one time that asked me, said, what do you know about nutrition? And I said, well, actually quite a bit as it relates to water specifically, right? And so we were talking about fluorosis, for example. And I said, well, I actually know a lot because I took a lot of organic chemistry. And so anyways, I think the point is that it's important to think about what is the cost in terms of the time and energy and financial costs going back to do a different degree, or is it beneficial to pursue career opportunities that will expose you to that subject matter in a practitioner's perspective? Because I think that's also important, right? So you can have a degree in all the theoretical, but having that experience is equally or more important. So that could be the way in which you kind of complement that engineering background through pursuing experiences or jobs or roles that are, in the area that you want to pursue.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I see any more hand raises. So we have 4 more minutes. So feel free to raise your hands and ask any more questions.
So I'm keen to hear from people in the chat. I mean, what is everybody's background? If they had to kind of label themselves as in terms of their academic, or even not necessarily their academic, how do you identify? So I would say kind of as an engineer, but feel free in the chat if people want to just share that, because it is interesting to think about who's attending these sessions.
So I misspoke. Someone do have a question,
okay.
Sarah.
Sorry.
You're able to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm in my 2nd year of my master's program in environmental engineering. And I was just kind of wondering, what were some experiences that you've had that were particularly useful in your journey to where you are now?
Well, I think that I would say probably throughout my whole career, PeaceCorps was really impactful in terms of recognizing, again, the frustrations and the challenges that you see on the ground, and oftentimes recognizing that it's not about necessarily money that's going to solve the problems or engineering that's going to solve the problems. It's really about the human side. And so building relationships and kind of the social capital elements. And so this is specifically some research that I did in PeaceCorps around the services provided in rural water supply and kind of the sustainability of rural water supply. And through that research, where I visited over 150 communities in the Dominican Republic, the same issues kept coming up, and they were all linked to the fact that it was a social capital issue. And so I think those experiences really working on the ground in the community they help me, they remind me when I'm sitting in some boardroom or some room where everybody's talking this theoretics and talking about budget and finance and stuff like that and engineering. And then they recognize, well, who's going to implement this? What is their skill set? How are they going to engage with the community? Has the community been involved from the get-go? What is their buy-in? All these kind of aspects are more about the process than about the content. And I think that's really what's important. And again, that has to be done through an interdisciplinary approach and with inputs from all levels. So it can't just be something that's, supply driven. It has to look at the demand and participation from the lowest level.
Thank you so much. That was a really good question. So we have our last question, since we're at our 1 minute mark, from Susie Proctor. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, so I'm a master's student at Gillings, and since you asked about backgrounds, I actually come from an ecology and conservation background. So, interested me in One Health when I first considered about getting my MPH, and currently I'm working a lot with environmental justice, and my question is, at least at the CDC, I see that as such a high level organization. And you have, really hit on the need for, community input, how it, is sometimes more, or it's just, it's really critical when you're trying to solve these public health problems versus, using your engineering skills. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, in such an organization like the CDC or other places that you've worked, how easy is it to, and how meaningful do you think the engagement is from the communities that you've worked with? Do you tend to have to use outside organizations from the CDC to get that kind of stakeholder and community engagement? Are you able to facilitate it yourself? Yeah.
That's a great question. And I think the short answer is yes, we have to get outside engagement, because I think particularly working internationally, I'm an American and I'm one of 320 or whatever million people. And so I can only really speak to like my community and what's really appropriate here and things like that. And I think at the end of the day, if you're going to work in a different context, it's important that you have that situational awareness, that cultural competency. But at the end of the day, you have to be coming into this and working through the local actors, right? And that means local government, it means local civil society, it means local private sector. And that's really how you ensure that there's that, and with local communities, obviously, but it's through those kind of partnerships that I think that interventions are most effective.
Thank you so much. So this is the end of our second session. Here we go. If you missed it, here's Ryan's, oops, I sent it to one person. So I'm going to copy and paste Ryan's email in the chat. You can go ahead and copy it or write it down so you can email them on your own time. So we are going to wait for some more people to shuffle in for a third session. I encourage you to move on to the other rooms and talk to the speakers and learn what their journey was and is, and what else you can learn from them.
Oh, Alison has one more question. Maybe we can do that while other people are coming.
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead. Alison, let me find you and you should be able to unmute.
You're just wondering, what is the meaning behind this email address? The QXF0?
Oh, it's like an anonymization so that no one can guess your email, I guess.
Super hidden. I appreciate the incognito.
I should come up with a good acronym, right? It's like question X-ray. I don't know. Sorry. All right.
I'm going to give it one more minute. Oh, there's only 3 of us here, so I will just go ahead and start it right now. So this is our third session. Hi, Annabelle. You are the only other audience.
This is a tailored session, Annabelle.
Yes. So like, this is for you if you want to ask as many questions as possible. So if you missed the first and second session, my name is Silne. I'm a graduate student at Gillings, and I am getting an MSPH through the Environmental Science and Engineering department. And you are muted for now, but whenever you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
Maybe we can just unmute her right away, and that way she
Yeah.
can ask a question.
Let's see. There, and if you don't mind, Ryan, give a brief introduction. I'm not sure if Annabelle was there from the get-go.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So hi, Annabelle. Good to meet you. So my background is in engineering. So I have a bachelor's in civil engineering, a master's in environmental, and a PhD in environmental. And following kind of my academic work, I was working in the private sector. I've also worked for national WASH ministry and local government, municipal government. And then I've also worked for a small NGO and the UN and now the federal government. So I've kind of had a very winding path, so to speak, throughout my career. But I think I've appreciated that because it's kind of given me these different perspectives and it's helped me understand what are the challenges and what are the, I think the benefits to different organizations. And so I think that kind of diversity has really, I've appreciated it. And yeah, I just joined with the CDC, so I'm really excited to be back in an environment where there's a lot more operational research occurring that I can kind of sink my teeth into, so to speak. So I'll leave it at that and happy to have any questions or discussions that you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, hello, my name is Annabelle. I'm a master's student at University of Colorado, Boulder, doing environmental engineering. And yeah, I guess I'm just curious, like it seems like people doing WASH research and work end up having a lot of different jobs, but like, I guess, how did you know, like out of college, like when you were studying your master's and PhD in environmental, that you wanted to do like, WASH related jobs? And like, I guess, because so far all I've kind of known is like, working as a consultant for like, companies in America who do like water, wastewater infrastructure for like, whatever city you're living in. So I don't really know that much about WASH. I'm just kind of curious how you got where you are. Yeah.
No, it's a good question. And WASH is kind of an acronym that's used really outside of the US or outside North America. It's kind of, if you're working domestically, I lived in Golden for a while and worked for an engineering company there doing geotechnical engineering. So yes, obviously in the US, you might be a water specialist or, wastewater. But I think I got interested when I was actually traveling. It was after doing my bachelor's and kind of realized that I need to expand my horizons personally. And so I wanted to get out of the US. And so I did some traveling in Latin America and came across some kind of rural communities that were struggling with issues on water supply. And so that's how I kind of got engaged. And working with a small NGO, did some kind of water supply, water quality projects there. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed like applying my skill set, engineering skill set, to benefit people that are struggling with the basics, right? And I think also showed, when you travel outside of the US, you realize how blessed we are, or I should say I am in my past and where I grew up and everything. So it was recognizing that it was, I think, important to me to address some social justice issues and dedicate my career to kind of that type of work. So I ended up going back to school and did a master's international with the PeaceCorps, and then was able to kind of be assigned to a project that was along the same trajectory. So it was a lot of water supply, but also sanitation and some hygiene promotion. And yeah, so I think that was it. And I really appreciate the fact that kind of with public health engineering, sometimes engineering can be a bit disconnected from the beneficiary, so to speak, from the people. And I appreciate that in general, WASH as a sector internationally, it's usually low tech. The technologies, at least thinking about like the complexity, are often not as complicated, but nonetheless really important and have a huge impact on people's lives. So I think that's really something that I appreciate in the day-to-day.
I have a question. So you mentioned working with PeaceCorps International as part of your studies. So do the PeaceCorps generally partner with the local non-NGO on the ground, then perform a research or intervention or work, or does the PeaceCorps identify a need in an area by themselves and then they go there to put some things in motion?
So Peace Corps, the way it works is that there's a need identified from within the community. And so that can be from within, a group of individuals in the community. It can be from a civil society organization, so a local or international NGO. It could be with local government, could be with national government. And so because in most countries, Peace Corps has kind of a historical relationship with the government, they've kind of have established programs and they have established relationships with government or NGOs, and they kind of have a channel or pipeline of projects. But you always have a local counterpart. And I think that's really critical. I think that's why Peace Corps is really effective, because the three missions are to kind of have this cultural exchange, so that Americans learn more about the local culture, and then also the local culture learns about what it is to be an American, and often destroying the stereotypes that people think that, Americans come in all shapes and sizes and colors and backgrounds and language abilities and intellectual abilities. And I think it's a great form of diplomacy. And then the third objective is really about satisfying the need for, I would say, impassioned, young, in most cases, professionals, people that have a real skill set and a real passion and energy to fill the needs of a local community. And so I think it's a great opportunity because it gives you that really grassroots community organizational background. And as we know with the past presidents that have started out their career that way, and I think it's really interesting because every day is something new, every day is a new challenge, and sometimes it's totally outside your skill set, but oftentimes you have to just learn while doing, and it's really, I think, empowering in a lot of ways.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions, Annabelle?
Yeah, I have another question. I guess I'm just curious because I guess because I feel like your work and like the work in WASH is so tied to like justice and like really caring about like other like countries. Do you ever like feel like you kind of lost that like passion to actually care about like the compassion or like care for other people, and you feel like your work is less like I don't know, tied to actually caring about people, and maybe more like you feel like you have ulterior motives or like just doing it for the money or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that what's helpful and what's grounding is that when you're able to get out in the field, and even working, for example, now with CDC in Atlanta, I was recently again at this village, also working with the UN. I was based in Geneva. But every time you get out into the field and you work and you pass somebody, even if you don't speak their language, but you start interacting with kids. And like, for example, I don't speak Pashto or Dari, and I have never been to Afghanistan, but I spent probably, I don't know, at least 30 minutes every day when I was checking out the sanitation facilities in this camp, of when a child was in the bathroom washing his hands, I would just be like, all right, let's do it. And any kid that's never seen a goofy white guy is going to stare at me, and I just do the hand washing and I sing the song and I show them, you do this, the backs of the hands. And it was just recognizing that at the end of the day, I have a son, these kids, they're all the same. They're kids, right? And people were all the same. And so I think that interaction with human beings, it always grounds you, and it recognizes that, I'm here helping, but it could easily have just been I was born in a different situation and somebody would be coming to help me. And I think that I need to recognize that I don't have the answers. I don't have, so that we're all working on these challenges and problems together. And so I think coming at it from that kind of humbleness is important, and kind of keeping you grounded in your day to day.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you ever feel like it sounds like you've lived in a lot of different places. Like, do you ever feel like you more just wanted to live in a different place as opposed to like actually, help the people there? I don't know. I guess I'm just like having this little crisis in my head where I feel like sometimes this kind of stuff sounds cool to me more because I think it would be cool to live in a different place than like, actually wanting to do it for like good reasons,
Just a quick warning. Sorry, we have 1 more minute before everyone goes back to the main session.
No, that's a really great question, Annabelle. And the short answer is there's a lot of great reading out there about aid and the fact that it's, oftentimes, I'm just trying to think of, if you send me an email, I'll come up with these, but there's a lot of great reading materials about, this concept that it's not about north-south, and it's not about we shouldn't do backpack medicine or backpack wash, coming in with all the answers, and looking at it from like a, more sustainable development perspective. And there's Dead Aid is the book I'm thinking of. But yeah, if you send me an email, I'm happy to dig up some of those things. But I think it's important that you continue to question yourself. And I think the fact that you are questioning is a really good step in the right direction, because I don't think the answer is the same for everybody as to what their career path is and whether they go live one place and work there their whole life, or they stay home and work here, because there are areas, for example, in the US, in Colorado, there's Indian reservations that have really, really bad wash situation. And so if you decide to work there, that could be a great place to work and spend your career.
Thank you so much. I will send you.
So much. It was really nice meeting you, Annabelle. So you can go back, you can just take your time and shuffling into the men's session where there'll be some closing suggestions and arguments maybe. I haven't been to the men's session yet, so I hope you enjoy it when you go back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.